Okay, today we're looking at a study about detecting AI-generated text.
Yeah, it's a pretty interesting one.
It really dives into,
Yeah,
can humans tell
right.
if something's written by AI or a
Absolutely.
person? And it's not just, like a simple test. They actually tried to trick people.
Yeah, and they use some pretty sophisticated methods.
Exactly.
They,
So what was their approach?
well, they had people read articles and then label them as
Okay,
either AI or human written.
got it. So just like a basic,
Right.
is this real or is
Yeah.
this fake kind of thing.
Exactly.
Right.
But the key here is they also had the participants explain their reasoning.
Oh, that's interesting.
Yeah.
So they had to say like why they thought it was
Right.
AI or human.
So that gives us some really valuable insights into what people are noticing.
Yeah, like what clues are they picking up on?
Exactly.
And they didn't just use any AI, right? They used different models.
Absolutely. They wanted to see if some models were easier to detect than others.
That makes sense.
Uh,
So which ones did they use?
well, they had GPT-4 in there, of course.
Okay, the big one.
Uh-huh. And then Claude.
Oh, interesting.
And then they even used OpenAI's newer Model O1.
Oh, wow. So they really wanted to
Yeah.
see how the latest and greatest
Yeah, cover a good range.
stacked up.
Exactly.
So what'd they find out?
Yeah.
Can humans actually tell the difference?
Well, one of the big takeaways is that people who use large language models a lot,
Okay.
especially for writing,
Hmm.
they're much better at spotting AI text.
Interesting.
The researchers called them experts.
Okay.
And their detection rates were really impressive.
Even without special training.
Yeah, even without specific training in AI detection.
That's wild. So just by using these tools a lot, you kind of develop a sense for it.
Exactly. It's like they pick up on the patterns without even realizing it.
But what kinds of patterns are we talking about? What are these experts actually noticing?
Well, the study found it's a few things combined.
Okay.
The experts mentioned noticing repetitive sentence structures. Uh-huh. So like the AI is kind of using the same
Yeah, kind of the
formulaic
formulas over and over.
Exactly. And they also talked about a lack of originality in the ideas.
So it's not just the words themselves, but also the content.
Right. The AI isn't really coming up with anything new or insightful.
It's kind of just regurgitating stuff it's already seen.
Exactly. And then there was also this sense of flatness in the writing style.
Okay, so it's not just what it's saying, but how it's saying it.
Yeah. The experts can just tell it wasn't quite human.
Interesting. I guess that makes sense, though. If you're used to reading AI writing,
Right.
you probably start to notice
You develop an eye for it.
these little quirks.
Exactly.
Now, did they find that certain topics were easier to detect as AI, or was it pretty much across the board?
They didn't specifically look at topic as a variable in the study,
Okay.
but there's this one part where they talk about quotes and
Okay.
how experts noticed that AI-generated articles often used quotes in a way that felt really unnatural or forced.
So it's like the AI was trying too hard to sound smart
Yeah, almost like it was just dropping in quotes randomly.
without really understanding the context.
Right.
That's fascinating.
Hmm.
I guess it makes sense, though, if the AI is trained on
Yeah.
a bunch of text with quotes.
It might not always use them appropriately.
Right. So it's not just about the words themselves, but also how they're used.
Exactly. Context is everything.
So they didn't stop at just testing, basic AI writing. They actually tried to make it harder for the experts to detect.
Right. They wanted to see if they could really throw them off.
What did they do?
Well, one thing they did was paraphrase the AI text.
Oh, so they ran it through another tool to reword it,
Exactly.
but keep the same meaning.
Mm-hmm. To see if the experts could still spot the AI fingerprints.
So it's kind of like if I took an AI article and then rewrote it in my own words.
Right, but imagine doing that with a whole article.
Yeah, that would be pretty tricky. And what about these humanization tactics you mentioned? What were those all about?
So that's where it gets really interesting.
Okay, I'm all ears.
They actually got the expert detectors to tell them what clues they were using.
Oh, so they basically asked the experts to reveal their secrets.
Right, they had them list out the things that tipped them off.
That's clever.
And then they took all those clues and compiled them into a sort of guidebook for spotting AI.
Okay, so they basically created a manual for how to outsmart the AI detectors.
Pretty clever, right?
That is brilliant. But what did they do with this guidebook?
Well, they used it to prompt the language model
Okay.
to generate text that would specifically evade detection.
So they basically told the AI, here's how humans are spotting you. Now try to write something that they won't catch.
Precisely. It was like a game of cat and mouse.
Wow, so they were really pushing the AI to become more sophisticated.
Yeah, to get better at mimicking human writing.
What a fascinating approach. So were the experts fooled by these, super stealthy humanized articles?
Well, that's what we're going to get into next.
Okay, because I am dying to know.
The results are pretty surprising.
All right, well, let's take a quick break.
Okay.
Then we'll dive into those results.
Yeah, so like I was saying, the results from that humanization part
Right.
were really interesting.
Uh,
Basically, the experts were still good,
Okay.
but this was definitely the hardest round for them.
Like their detection rates went down.
Yeah, they were still high overall,
Okay.
but they weren't quite as confident as before.
Makes sense.
And there was actually one article that most of them thought was human written.
Really? So even the experts, with all their experience and the guidebook and everything,
Right, even with all that.
they still got tricked.
Yeah, it just goes to show how good these models are getting.
That's kind of unsettling, to be honest.
Yeah, I mean, it definitely raises some questions.
Okay, what was this article that fooled everyone?
It was a science article about,
Okay.
let me see, it was called New Telescope Could Potentially Identify Planet X.
Planet X. That sounds pretty interesting.
Yeah, it was originally published in Discover magazine.
A science article, huh? I wonder if there was something about the topic that
Hmm.
made it harder to detect.
Well, that's what's interesting. It
Mhm.
wasn't really any more technical than the other articles.
So it wasn't full of jargon or anything?
No, it was written for a general audience.
So maybe the AI was just really good at capturing that science writing style.
It seems that way.
Like the tone and everything.
Exactly. It just
Yeah.
sounded really authentic.
That's both fascinating and a little scary.
I know, right? It's
It makes
like,
you wonder if we're going to reach a point where
yeah.
it's just impossible to tell the difference.
So that's a question a lot of people are asking.
Right. Like if even the experts could be fooled,
Mm-hmm.
what hope is there for the rest of us?
Well, I wouldn't
Right.
say it's hopeless. This study shows us that AI can get really good at mimicking human writing,
Right.
but it also gives us some valuable insight into how to improve our detection skills.
Okay, so what can we do to become better AI detectors?
Well, first of all, it's important to be aware of the common traits of AI writing.
Okay.
We've talked about some of them already.
Like the repetitive structures and the lack of originality.
Exactly. But there are other things to watch out for, too.
Like what?
Well, sometimes AI writing can be overly formal, or it might rely too much on certain adverbs.
Like very and really.
Yeah, exactly. Or the tone just might seem off somehow.
So it's really about paying attention to those subtle cues, like those little things that give it away.
Right, it's kind of like training your ear
Okay.
to identify different musical instruments.
Yeah, I get it.
You start to notice the unique sounds of each one.
So it's about developing that kind of sensitivity to language.
Exactly. And don't underestimate the power of your intuition either.
What do you mean?
Well, if something just doesn't feel right.
Like if you're reading something and you get this feeling that it's not quite human,
Yeah.
don't ignore that feeling.
So trust your gut.
Yeah, your gut is often picking up on something that your conscious mind hasn't noticed yet.
Interesting. So what do you do if you get that feeling?
Well, you can investigate further.
Okay.
Maybe cross-reference the information or look up the author.
Right. Do some background research.
Exactly. And there are even some AI detection tools out there now.
Oh, really? Like websites or apps that can analyze text?
Yeah, there are a few. They're not perfect,
Okay.
but they can be helpful.
So it's kind of like we all need to become AI-aware readers.
Absolutely.
Like always questioning and analyzing what we see online.
Exactly. Because as these AI models get better,
Right.
our detection methods need to keep up.
It's like an arms race.
Yeah, you could say that.
Well, this has been incredibly eye-opening.
I'm glad to hear it.
It seems like the line between human and AI is getting blurrier and blurrier.
It definitely is. And it's up to all of us to figure out how to navigate that.
Absolutely. We can't just be passive consumers of information anymore.
Right. We have to be more critical.
Exactly. And more engaged with what we're reading.
Well said. So before we wrap up,
Yeah.
there's one more thing I'm curious about.
Okay.
We've talked a lot about humans detecting AI.
Mm-hmm.
But what about using AI to detect AI?
Ah, that's a good question.
Did the researchers look into that at all?
They did, actually. And it turns out that
Yeah.
the idea of using AI to fight AI isn't as far-fetched as it sounds.
So they actually used AI to try and spot AI-generated content.
Yeah, it's not as crazy as it sounds.
Okay, how did they do it?
Well, they took that guidebook we talked about.
Right, the one with all the clues the experts were using?
Exactly. And they fed it to a language model
Oh, wow.
and basically said, okay, now you be the detector.
So they trained an AI
Uh-huh.
to think like the human experts.
Yeah, to look for the same telltale signs.
That's wild.
Yeah.
So how did it do? Was this AI detective as good as the humans?
It was pretty good, actually.
Yes.
It even did better than some of the simpler detection methods out there,
Wow.
but it wasn't quite as accurate as the best human experts.
Especially with those tricky humanized articles, right?
Yeah, those were definitely the hardest for the AI to catch.
So it seems like we humans still have a slight edge
At least for now.
when it comes to understanding the nuances of language.
Yeah, there's something about human intuition
Hmm.
that's still hard to replicate.
But do you think we'll be able to hold on to that advantage as AI keeps getting better?
That's a tough question. I mean, this study doesn't really give us a clear answer,
Yeah.
but it does highlight the need for more research.
Right. We need to keep studying this as AI evolves
Exactly. We need to understand how these models are working.
and how we can adapt our detection methods.
Absolutely, because the stakes are getting higher.
Right. I mean, this isn't just some theoretical problem anymore.
Yeah, this is stuff that's impacting our everyday lives.
So what are the most important things for our listeners to take away from all of this?
I think the biggest takeaway is just awareness.
Okay.
Be aware that AI-generated content is out there.
Right. It's everywhere.
Exactly. And it's only going to become more prevalent.
So we can't just assume that everything we read is written by a human.
Yeah, we need to be more critical.
Question what we see online.
Exactly. And don't be afraid to use the tools and resources that are available.
Like fact-checking websites and AI detection tools.
Yeah, those can be really helpful.
Well, this has been a fascinating deep dive.
It has been, hasn't it?
I feel like I've learned so much.
I'm glad to hear that.
It's clear that AI is changing the way we interact with information,
Absolutely.
and we all need to be prepared for that.
Yeah, this is just the beginning.
Well said. Well, that's all the time we have for today. A huge thank you to you for joining us and sharing your insights.
It was my pleasure.
And to all of you listening out there, thanks for tuning in. We'll see you next time.